Hello everyone, very good afternoon to you, and today we have a very important person with us that we're going to speak with, and I hope the kind of information that we receive from him is very useful to us. In fact, I got pretty lucky that Punit Oza is basically from Singapore and he happened to be in India, and we are very lucky that he agreed to do this podcast with us. So Punit, welcome. And
Thank you
for
so
your
much.
time.
Thank you very much. I will really enjoy meeting you for the first time face to face, and I really look forward to the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thanks
lovely.
for the opportunity.
So Punit is the founder of Maritime NXT and is into venture investment fund into the maritime sector. And Punit is also a faculty with the Singapore Maritime University and the MP Academy, that is Maritime and Ports Authority of Singapore Academy. And he's also supporting a lot of startups and innovation centers into the new advanced technologies of the maritime sector. So Punit, once again, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you.
So let me begin with, since you have worked a lot for a very long time in Singapore and foreign jurisdictions, and we know that India has a very large history, the maritime history. But unfortunately, as a sector, and to the trade and logistics also, that we have not yet reached there, being a global hub of maritime. So what do you think that Singapore has done as a jurisdiction? What are the takeaways from that jurisdiction, and what do you think could be the building blocks that we could look at and we could replicate or learn from them?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Madhvendra. I think this is a very interesting question from the perspective of learnings, because I believe that if you actually do have players or let's say travelers who have been on a journey before, then the new travelers or travelers who want to recreate paths can obviously learn from these seasoned travelers, so as to speak. In some ways, I think India teaches a lot to Singapore as well. But what Singapore has done very smartly is that they've actually created an ecosystem which has actually helped literally self-motivate the companies to do more and more business in Singapore. So one of the first things that they actually have got in terms of advantage is a manageable size. So starting small is very important. And I think that's where, if you look at the fact that rather than doing a pan-India kind of a thing, you're actually focusing on a region and starting to see if you can build that region ecosystem. You see that those lessons learned can then be supplanted, extrapolated across the entire country. They've done that quite successfully. The other thing they've done is they've tried to create an understanding that the big players matter a lot. So when I came in 2006 to Singapore, they brought some of the biggest, largest commodity players and shipping companies to Singapore. BHP relocated their global headquarters to Singapore. Vale, one of the largest iron ore trader and producers, relocated to Singapore,
So
their
Punit,
headquarters.
when you say that they brought them, I mean, what did they specifically do? Like they brought in some kind of regulatory framework, or they provided them some kind of financing initially? How did it work?
Yeah,
Like?
so most of them have come in through the either the GTP scheme, which is a preferred trader scheme, which the trading companies get, or the AIS scheme, the Approved International Shipping Enterprises. Most of it involves two things. One is, of course, the ability to have tax holidays for 10 years, which you obviously have similar in the IFSC Gift City as well. The other thing which they have done very smartly is given access to Asia, which very few countries could afford. A lot of the Asian and the ASEAN countries especially have a lot of challenges when it comes to the ability to have a multicultural workforce as such. I think it's changing now, but still Singapore is the leader when it comes to the ability to provide an atmosphere and environment for people to come together and work for pan-Asian business. I'll give you a very simple example. If you are a Singaporean passport holder or ASEAN passport holder or even the APEC passport holder, you can get what is called ABTC, APEC Business Travel Card, which basically allows you to go visa-free to all the APEC business countries across the globe. Now, this is something which is very interesting because as a businessman, I would love to have this kind of access out there. India can probably look at doing similar for the Indian Ocean countries if they actually build some kind of a model like
So
this.
this is like this is replacing the normal passport, or it's kind of a business passport?
It replaces the visa.
Wow. Okay.
You don't need a
Okay.
visa. So you can go for business travel, 45 days, visa free to these countries. And I think these are some of the initiatives which they led and they pushed ahead very quickly because they knew that they needed to be business friendly from day one. And when the big players have arrived, the services industry has grown around it basically. So the lawyers have come, the brokers have come, the agents have come, and that has actually created lawyers, financiers. And what they did was very interesting is that they said if you're a foreign player and you want to come up and set up, the first two people you can bring from abroad, from your home country, and we will give them the employment pass without any questions. Because you're setting up a shop here, you please bring two people, let them set up the shop. After that, as you recruit more people, we would like certain amount of Singaporean permanent residents or citizens to get involved. So the citizen first policy is also a bit important to understand. If you can create the infrastructure to create the talent in your country and make sure that talent is plentiful, and I think India has a lot of it already, please make sure that any growth must be inclusive for the country's welfare as well. Singapore is very clear, citizens first. If you want the citizens to be involved, they will be very happy to support you even more going forward. So I think India should learn from that and not be afraid of doing the citizens first policy in general.
So that's what, in fact, I'm very delighted to also let you know that the whole purpose of setting up a cluster like this is basically bringing all the stakeholders together in one place.
Sure.
And we'll also be coming up with our own cluster complex where we have, we want all the stakeholders to not only be in one geographical location, but also to, utilize each other's, benefits and whatever their strengths are, and basically to grow together from there. Also, you have a lot of a good background in the geopolitics, and you also teach
Yes.
the effects of geopolitics on the maritime sector. So, in fact, I have also experience with the Ministry of External Affairs, having served there, and I understand the importance of global connect. So, what do you think for the maritime industry, for the cluster, and for the whole sector in India? How important is it for them to have that global connect, that know-how from the international jurisdictions? Also, for the cluster, what kind of an outreach program should the cluster adopt? And how important would it be like to have that awareness internationally?
So I think geopolitics is a topic which is predominantly discussed from an economic and a political perspective, but very seldom looked at from a trade perspective, which is why I teach the students both in Singapore and other universities a lot of the geopolitical aspects. I actually believe that going forward, India will play a very big role in terms of the regional as well as global geopolitics going forward. One of the biggest advantages is the diaspora. The fact that we have presence in inverted commas in every single country in the world helps a lot in terms of selling the way India needs to market itself, because you cannot market everywhere on your own. You need people to be your brand ambassadors. So I think India has one big advantage there. China had to export brand ambassadors over the years to create that geopolitical, and they had to invest heavily in the countries. India has that advantage that it actually has brand ambassadors globally already. Second thing is geopolitics actually creates and breaks or destroys trade flows all the time. So India has to either be at a clear way or a crossroads where it decides which are the trade flows which it can actually facilitate going forward, and therefore partake in the benefits that those trade flows bring. They can either be financed, because I still remember that there was a global fund which they actually set up to invest in Mozambique coal, for example. That was a very smart move, because at that point of time, Mozambique were not able to get the funding from anywhere, and they could actually service the sale as well as the other Coal India business. At the same time, also service that region in Africa as well. So such geopolitical investments will actually build trade flows because of the fact that people who are invested will actually reap benefits from it. Shipping companies will actually have to follow these geopolitical trends in order to make sure that they preempt or benefit from these trade flows. Either by actually shipping the commodities or by actually forecasting what the demand supply scenario will work out in order to predict market flows going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's very important. In fact, look at the small significant changes that trade flows routes can make, actually, that initially from West Africa to US. Now it's prominently West Africa to China.
Yep.
And that kind of tonnage miles have increased. So that itself has given like large number of new shipbuilding orders. So that's basically looking into the future with respect to the trade flows. Very relevant and important aspect you brought out actually. And also with the recent visit of our Prime Minister, we know that the American government has actually given a sanction for getting their ships repaired in India.
Right.
They've made this kind of an arrangement with the Indian shipyards, starting from L&T, then looking forward to the MDL and also the Goa shipyard, where the Indian warship, the American warships would come for repair and refits in Indian shipyard. I think it's a big milestone that we have achieved.
Absolutely.
So great. Also I would want to understand, because dispute resolution is a very important aspect, and you have been the executive director with the SCMA.
Yes.
So with your experience and also with the jurisdictional image that Singapore has, so what do you think makes them unique jurisdictionally as well as from the perspective of their rules? What have they adopted, and why is that ecosystem working so well, and how what are the takeaways and lessons that we can learn from there?
So absolutely, on the maritime side, London has had the legacy of being the leading dispute resolution center on the maritime side for many years. Singapore has been working very closely in terms of trying to get a lot of the Asian share of its dispute resolution. I think the SIAC has done very well because they've actually created that atmosphere, but they've also had a lot of investment going into that space. What Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration has done is basically simplified the way the rules are structured. So the new rules are basically, as I call, a user manual, which I was involved with. And obviously the procedure committee did a fantastic job to make sure that even if you are a novice or a person who's not necessarily a legal expert, you can still go through the arbitration space. The other thing which is very interesting is that there are specialized procedures for certain type of claims. For bunkering claims, you have the Singapore bunker claim procedures, you have the Singapore collision claims, the CDOC procedures, which can actually cater to certain types of claims, and the procedures are simple enough for parties to resolve the disputes. What really needs to do is to build a business case. Even if eventually you want to build one in Gujarat with the maritime arbitration, it has to be a business case centric scenario. Does it make sense for me to take the service locally rather than go internationally? If does make sense business wise, then there is no reason why somebody would actually go internationally as well, because the expertise with technology is flowing so much easier. Virtual meetings, virtual expert witnesses, and virtual arbitration hearings are becoming more common. So the proximity or the actual location of the experts or arbitrators is irrelevant today.
That's right.
10 years ago, 15 years ago, this would have been a big issue. You had to fly people down.
Of course, especially talking about the small value claims.
Yeah.
You really don't, that virtual hearing is pretty much significant, and I think it's there to stay that way.
Absolutely.
And also, in fact, like you said, historically LMA has been the center of all maritime arbitration, and progressively the ICC and CIAC and Dubai also, they're taking the center stage now.
Yep.
But having said that, I think ad hoc is the way to go ahead in the maritime also.
I agree.
And what the point which you mentioned is that dedicated rules for collisions, dedicated rule for bunkering claims and all that. So I think that would also be a great thing to do actually.
I agree, and it just makes it easier, because when you have a framework, sometimes those frameworks actually make both parties very clear in terms of what their obligations and their procedures are. Because sometimes any kind of ambiguity makes the claim go longer and prolongs the whole dispute, and then it becomes financially not viable.
Of course, arbitration, the choice of arbitration as a matter of adjudication is only because of time and cost efficiency.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, it's the parties that are paying, not anyone else.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Also, Punit, you see, you are also a consultant. You're meeting so many companies. You're consulting them. And what do you see, like, where the future of maritime lies with respect to technology, with respect to the new kind of ships, new kind of fuels, and then the whole kind of autonomous vessels coming in. So where do you think the leaders of the maritime industry should be looking at in the future, 20 years from now?
I think it's a very difficult discussion or difficult thing to say. But one thing is for sure, that if you look at the if you take away the defense part of it, or you take away the security part of it, I believe nuclear is the most lasting solution. But the challenge with nuclear is going to be the actual security aspects and the safety aspects of it. So it has to become commercially viable. But if you take the current situation as it is, I still believe that the future is hydrogen. Hydrogen is probably the one which will actually come in its own way. Interestingly, there is a group of people in the Middle East, for example, who believe that carbon capture becomes easier. Because when you actually have the current fossil fuel being burnt in the ship, if you can capture the carbon and reuse it or get it out as an emission, then obviously you can continue to use the current fuels as well. So I think we have to see where the technology takes us going forward. But current LNG dual fuel ships or methanol, I think will be a transitionary phase for the next 15 odd years. But come the next decade, we'll probably have very different ships on the water going forward. Unfortunately, shipping is an investment which has 25-year horizon, so people don't want to really invest unless they are very sure about it. So this will be a challenge, yeah.
So also, since you're investing in a lot of startups, now what do you see kind of a culture which is emerging with respect to the new innovations that are happening in the maritime technology, or what sectors are the startups looking at?
Absolutely, I think startups have one of the biggest advantages is that because they are lean, the cost that they actually have is much lower. So the fixed cost is much lower for them. So they are able to experiment much faster. That's what I call the fail fast approach. The other thing which is interesting is that a lot of the startups come from outside the industry. So when as a domain expert, I listen to these people, I actually have 3 clear questions that I ask them and then answer it for them. First is your solution actually trying to solve a pain point which needs solving? A lot of these people have very good solutions, but it is so trivial as a problem that people don't need to solve it. Secondly, if it is worth solving as a pain point, is it something which solves for scale or not? Does it solve for 100 users or does it solve for 1 million users? And if you can scale it up, then it makes sense for you to do it. And the final question I ask them is that when you look at this solution, how does this collaborate in terms of the overall ecosystem? Does it fit into what the current setup is, or is it going to try and create a completely new ecosystem? That will take more time. If it fits into the current set of systems and improves them efficiency wise, money wise, then it's an immediate fit. So if you can answer these 3 questions as yes, then your product is actually ready for a real investment solution as such going forward. Most of the places where investment is currently being done is both in vessel-based solutions which can be fitted on the ship like smart ships and sensors, or shore-based solutions in terms of monitoring. But what is most interesting is extrapolation of solutions from other industries to shipping. So airline, for example, has actually had, and hotel industry has actually had this algorithm-based software for many years as to how the airline tickets are booked and hotel bookings are done, right? Container ships have now started using that in terms of finding out if the 60% of a ship is already booked with containers, then the rest of the 40% has a higher percentage of money that needs to be got at. So slowly you are actually finding that extrapolation is happening. And I still believe that it has to come from outside. The solutions cannot come from within ourselves. We can improve ourselves all the time, but if you want to shock something, it has to come from outside, I believe, yeah.
That's true. In fact, recently we also hosted the Ship Chat India event.
Yes.
There are also a lot of technologies were demonstrated. It's pretty insightful, to see what's happening, especially with the availability of Starlink at sea.
Yes.
The real-time visibility in the whole spectrum would be possible then. But one last thing I want to ask you, Punit, is that you've been in the maritime for a long time. What keeps you motivated? What do you think is the life of a seafarer is? What are the challenges, and why should somebody be, looking at joining as a seafarer or joining a shipping line?
So I actually wrote about this, that there are 3 P's which drive the people in the shipping industry. One is the passion. You need to really be passionate about the fact that you're doing something which is really taking you forward yourself, as well as globally you're making a difference. Every single thing in this room has probably been shipped from somewhere or will be shipped somewhere else as well. The passion is important, and that keeps me going, because obviously talent is a very important part of that. The second thing is profit, because anything actually has to have an economic value behind it. You don't do things just for the sake of doing it. You need to see economic benefits coming out of it, either yourself or somebody else benefits from it. But the last part is the most important thing about shipping, and that's purpose. You actually are serving a lot of people by actually shipping that steel cargo from Haldia to UK. You are actually shipping a lot. You are helping a lot of people by shipping that aid cargo from US to some place in Africa. Because of that aspect of purpose, you can make a real difference. You don't see that happen because you don't see the actual people consuming that product like you see in some other industries. But in reality,
besides that, the whole fun, the charm of being at sea,
yeah,
and the whole international nature of it. When I joined the Navy, the slogan they use is "Join the Navy, see the world."
Yes,
I think that's very true for the merchant Navy also.
It is, and it broadens your perspective.
Yeah, it does. And then the whole adventure part of it, the kind of adventures you have at sea. I mean, the kind of new people you meet, the new ports you go to, the new kind of technologies you interact with. It's fantastic.
And I recently wrote on the Day of Seafarer just recently that that when I'm not a seafarer. When I went to the company, first company, Precious Shipping, most of my colleagues were seafarers who were technical managers. And they taught me firsthand by sending me to ships or teaching me ideas as to what the life of a seafarer is. Because as a non-seafarer, you kind of tend to think that this is a cushy life, but in reality, it's a tough life. And you must salute all the seafarers who do such an amazing job. During the COVID time, we actually found that was shipping not able to help, the supermarket would have been empty.
Absolutely.
There's no way that we would have got any of these things.
Would have been larger kiosks.
Exactly.
All around, yeah.
So we need to thank ourselves, the industry and what they do. And I would not choose any other industry if I had to do another one. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So thanks, Punit, once again, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Short notice, I mean, you could come over.
Oh,
thanks
most
for talking
welcome.
to us. I'm sure all our listeners would really benefit from your experience.
Thank you so much.
So we'll keep looking forward to seeing
Further
you
interactions.
very often. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.